this, and then there's slope cutouts and all that. But if it's on a flat surface and it's a bike trail, what is the width that we need to clear that natural forest? And if it's a pedestrian trail only, let's say, what is it with all those side clearing that we need to do? And then on a slope, so it's four answers. If it's a slope and you have to cut out and then clear more, what would it be for a bike and what would it be for pedestrian? Because we heard the presentation from Parks last time and I drew conclusions from that, and now I want to hear how you approach that same question.
So for both bike trails and pedestrian trails, you can have a very limited impact. If it's flat, you don't have to have an impact to the side really at all. For both bike trails and for pedestrian trails, the first thing you'll do is for the actual width of the trail. So for instance, the 4-foot pedestrian trail, say it's 4 feet.
Okay.
So the first thing you would do is remove the planks, the leaf litter, the compost surface, and the part of the soil that is that they call humus. So you get down to mineral soil. And you do this both with a bike trail and a pedestrian trail. The pedestrian trail, for the way we usually do it in Seattle Parks, is we actually have some kind of neat tools where they come down with two 2x4s that are chained together. They're the right distance apart, and then the volunteers or whatever, after it's been cleared and down to the mineral soil, then they put 4 inches of gravel on top of it. So if it's flat, that's all the impact it has to have. There's the stuff that you've dug up and thrown to the side, but that's it's like compost. It's like not. I wouldn't say that it's a bad impact to the forest. With the bike trail, same thing. It doesn't necessarily have to have a bigger impact than the width of the trail itself if you're on flat. And it's the same thing. It's removing those top layers and getting down the mineral soil. And that mineral soil, it's any typical hike that you've been on in the mountains. That's how those trails are made. And both our pedestrian trails and our bike trails can have a similar feeling and amount impact as hiking trails in the mountains that you're familiar with. They can have very little impact on the environment around them. However, the bigger impact comes when the slope starts to get higher. And what I showed you was kind of an extreme example. It's like the steepest slope on site. And in that particular example, they call it a full bench trail. When you're building a trail into slope, you don't want to do like cut and fill. There's this concept of bouncing cut and fill, because the fill part will not be stable. It will just slide down.
Right.
So you cut the whole surface of the trail into the slope. So you're cutting a piece of the slope out. So how big is that actually? It's when you've got one slope. We've got one slope going like this and one slope going like this. Here's the trail. It really matters how far that goes, because this, it's like this, you can catch up pretty soon. But this back here, it takes a lot longer. So that's why in the example we showed you, if you're making just a 1-foot wide trail, the impact that you're cutting is less than 3.5 feet wide. So there will be, you're cutting out a bunch of soil, and that generally gets kind of scattered down the slope, the stuff that's removed. And there's just a ton of tricks and techniques that trail builders use to make sure that they're fitting this trail into the contours, to manage the water on it right, and all sorts of stuff like that. So in our example, the 4-foot wide trail had an impact. It was 13 feet, and it's just a mathematical reality that with the geometry. And when you think about the volume of soil that they're removing, and again, I'll mention that the geotech, the geotech told me, slope isn't everything. You know, he's concerned about places where landslides used to be. Is the soil inherently stable or not? So that's not the one. But when you think about taking a big notch out of the hillside versus taking a little notch out of the hillside, you can see it. Like, you know, 13 feet wide, you're more likely to run over some trees. If it's 3 feet wide, you can kind of work around the trees. So that's where the less impacted vegetation, and also you can imagine kind of just the slopes of stability that's taking that chunk out.
So then, in the presentation we had from Parks last time, I think that the differences that you've expressed in terms of the impact of a bike trail from a pedestrian trail weren't called out. Is that fair? And also I was hearing even larger setbacks or whatever, just clearing along either of those trails. And I was wondering, from your standpoint, you worked with Parks, obviously. That appears to be a standard the way it was reported to us, and how does that standard fit into what you're doing
And
here?
I've worked on trail, you know, layout and creation with Jacobo, who gave you the presentation last time. So, you know, we are in accord on how trails get built. But I neglected to mention just now that part of the trail standard, it's not clearing, it's selective trimming of vegetation that's close to the trail. And part of the reason for that is to keep the maintenance low. Because if you've got bushes that want to grow really big, you know, you'll constantly have to be trimming them because they're trying to grow over the trail. You're not removing plants, you're trimming them, or if possible, you're encouraging low growing plants such as like ferns, for instance, to grow along the trail. Yeah, but it's not removing.
That's really helpful. I just want to make a sort of a concluding statement. It seems to me that the design that we're looking at right now favors the bicycle path, eliminates essentially pedestrian with the exception of the pedestrian trail by the eastern edge of the property, because we already have the trail that is Cheesty Boulevard. So, and then the additions for pedestrians go up the southern boundary up to Cheesty at that point. So what we're seeing here, in my view, is a very clear emphasis on bicycles and not on pedestrian, and that's what the trade-off is in order to not do as much environmental excavation and trail work in the project overall. Is that a fair? Oh, I mean, whether it's fair or not, that's my observation of what we're looking at. Sorry, thanks for the time.
I'll get it written down. Dave?
Yeah, I would like to we are on the path because it is a mountain biking pilot, so I'd like to focus on the trail and the environmental stuff. You've done a lot to this, Maggie, and there's tons of data. The data we saw today, it proves to me that there's no doubt that a mountain bike trail will be sustainable in this location. So I guess my question is just to get down to the fun stuff, because we have a lot of mountain bikers here, I noticed tonight. I'm wondering if you consulted with any mountain bikers, consulted with any other trail builders. The trail looks solid to me. I'm just wondering, and this is a question for the entire pack, if we are truly going to look at a bike pilot, then I need to know what's the sample size of riders that we're going to look at as far as determining if it's a success or not. Because if we have 2 entryways and there's 1,000 riders, I don't know, a month or something or whatever, that doesn't really give us a clear indication of it's success or not. I'm also worried about the features and what sort of features you have for mountain bikers. If we dull this thing down to the average rider, we're not going to get that much usage. And I completely understand we want to bring young beginning riders out there, but we also need to have a challenging course for people that do a lot of mountain biking. So I'm wondering about where do you see the different pinch points. I'm wondering if you have any teeter-totters planned. I'm wondering where the berms are. I'm wondering what sort of logs we could use to ride over. I'm wondering the wetlands, when we cross the wetlands, what does that look like? I'm wondering just some of the other features that are attractive to mountain bikers that are sitting here in the room right now, and I know they're dying to go get on that trail as soon as possible, like in July or something. So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I can. I have looked at other mountain bike trails. I have talked with people who build mountain bike trails. and really looked at the literature a lot too. I think what it comes down to is that there has been a determination on this project that for the pilot, the only part of the kind of mountain bike vision that will be built is the perimeter loop trail. And so a perimeter loop trail within a mountain bike facility is not going to be the most exciting. It's going to be the one that everyone can access. I think the kinds of features that can be incorporated into this are going to be, for the pilot period, are going to be limited to kind of simple things, like, we found a log on site next to the path, so there's a choice there, or, there's going to be little things. I think the feeling of the mountain bike designers would be that, in a long run, this by itself is probably not a sustainable mountain bike trail from a use point of view, because it would need those more interesting aspects.
Daryl?
I'm also kind of curious about the kind of standards and the mountain bike community and how you came up with determination of some of the components on the trail. And during the process, I noticed early on there was a reference to a book that the IMDA puts out called Trail Solutions. And I'm curious if that's something that's available to the path that we can actually see. There isn't one in the library system, and I'm assuming that's what we're basing all of the design components on. I'd love to have a copy of it, if we can have one. I'm assuming that's what.
Do you have it in front of you there, or you
That's
just,
just the name of it.
you found it on site, or, and what was the?
It was referenced last year during the bike policy and some of the discussions that were set forth during the Parks Board, Parks Commission meetings.
So, yeah, there is an abundance of wonderful reference works about mountain bike trails. I think people would be really interested in the degree of kind of research, technology, interest in maintenance, interest in sustainability that are expressed in these documents. I have a little stack on my desk borrowed from mountain bikers. So I don't know which are in print, out of print, or could they be ordered? I think it would be awesome if you all could take a look at these reference books.
I think it's just important to focus on standards, and I think that's what we need to generate for the city of Seattle is a mountain bike trail standard that they can use in the long term.
I feel like there are standards out there, we're just applying them. 1 to 3 feet.
Yeah, the kinds of, we didn't make up any of these kind of, the standards that we're using, the size of the trail, the types of gradients. We did look at a number of standards for, and now I'm going to forget exactly which facilities they were for. For instance, there's a facility in Whistler. There's another one in Northwest Washington. There's a number of these established kind of mountain bike facilities that have developed a set of standards. And my understanding is that the Department of Ecology, the State Department, the one guy who works there, Doug.
Let's do this. Let's make a reference list,
Yeah.
and we can do a little bibliography or something, and kind of figure some stuff out, and figure out what's online and what's available, and make that available to the path.
Okay, one quick comment. I did find one that American Trails produced. It's a book called Pathways to Trail Building. It's 40 pages long. I think they were in Tennessee that they produced it, and I don't know if anyone else is familiar with this. It sounds like it's used pretty commonly for standards. And I just want to point out some of the items in it. I noticed it said, I recommend areas to avoid when building a trail would be wetlands, areas of invasive vegetation. They recommend it being 100 feet from the edge of the property. They also recommend avoiding switchbacks. And they go on to describe areas of wet or poorly drained soils should be avoided. So, that's why I really want to hone on what standards we're using. If it's something from Tennessee, it may not be appropriate.
Okay, great, thanks. Ed, go ahead. And then, Weston, we haven't heard from you tonight. I want to make sure you get a chance to weigh in here. Go ahead, Ed, and then we'll hear from Weston.
Going back to the exciting mountain bike features, Maggie, do we have the opportunity to add some of those in so the experience is maintained and people will come, so the trail isn't kind of watered down? And do we have time or the opportunity to add some of those? Is there an opportunity to consult more, say, mountain bikers or involve them in that process?
Right. I think this is an area that is fuzzy, like to what extent can the perimeter trail itself be made into an interesting and engaging trail that has some challenges for mountain bikers. I think people are being really careful to stay within what the Parks Administration has determined is the definition of a perimeter loop trail for this project. What we've discussed that probably is acceptable are the kinds of things I mentioned earlier with kind of making events out of found objects along the trail. I think a lot of that goes to, what happens at the end of the pilot.
Weston.
So I'll start there because I think there's more to be said. Given the fact that it looks highly unlikely that there will be additional skill areas at this time or more intricacies, I want some level of assurance that this loop trail is worth it. I think this is a really contentious thing that's happening, and if this loop trail doesn't meet some level of interest for use, then I think we should really reconsider. So can you say, I don't know if it's been said, does this loop trail match the one that was in the original plan that the bike group put forth?
It's pretty similar. I have to say the way we looked at that plan, and then we were very concerned about making sure that we could make a loop trail that actually works when we're being very assiduous about fitting it into the grades and stuff. And what we found is it works, and it's pretty close to that one.
Great, thank you. To Sarah's point about the perhaps lack of pedestrian trail here, can you talk about what the section along Chisti looks like? I know that right now that's a really lousy walking spot. And if this is a potential to improve it, I want to hear about it. Is that a really wide sidewalk? Is it a dirt trail off the side of the road? Can you speak to that?
It's a crushed rock path that was made to, it's essentially the same kind of 4-foot wide crushed rock path. I think in places it's kind of grown in with grass on the edges.
So we're not getting any new facility there?
I think it's something maybe to talk about is that we're talking about the plan, and the plan has a bit of a vision component to it, and then there's the actual funding and what that's going to pay for, and I can't really address that.
Okay.
Thanks, Weston. Connie.
I wanted to, positive.
Okay, can you especially use your microphone for that?
Maggie, I wanted to comment on the Chisti view site there. I think that that's an excellent idea, and the opportunity for people who have some disabilities and whatnot to be able to go there and get a view and look into the forest and whatnot. So I commend you. I like that. I like that component.
Thank you.
Can I jump back in? I want to second Dave, I think was the first person to bring it up, but that maybe we look at additional access points. I think that was really key, pedestrian or bike or both. one of the big pieces of public comment that we've heard the past few meetings that haven't really come up here today was around access for folks moving